What's happening, good people? We are back again. Riot Starter TV, one of your favorite platforms, programs on the platform. Welcome to Black Power Media. If it's your first time coming through, make sure you subscribe to the channel because this is the place where you can get all things African throughout the diaspora. You know, we're going to make sure that we keep you with that rough, rugged, and raw. Man, it's been I was hitting pretty hard with the Riot Starter TVs and I kind of slowed down a little bit. But I said I wanted to come back, and I wanted to come back with something that's necessary. And I think that we can never get too much coverage when it comes to what's going on the continent. And I think that oftentimes, we kind of jump on what's popping at the time, what's popular, or what the West says is popular. You know what I'm saying? What mainstream media is talking about. And if mainstream media is not talking about it, then oftentimes we miss it. Tonight, I wanted to, deal with a crisis that's been going on for 30 plus years. You know what I mean? A crisis that's been going on that went from genocide to post-genocide to, torture and kidnappings and so on and so forth. And they still kicking it live right now. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about Rwanda because of the fact that the last couple episodes, when we dealt with the continent, we dealt with what was going on in the Congo. We dealt with what was going on in Ethiopia. And, we definitely can't forget about Rwanda. And we're looking to cover all 54 plus countries by the time we finish doing what we're doing. So tonight, I wanted to bring on a couple comrades who are serious about that work, who I hate to use the word fled, but I guess that's a safe word. They escaped what was going on over in that particular region. You know what I mean? And I wanted to talk to them about their experience, what took place prior, and what's going on now. So without further ado, I want to introduce you all to Claude Gatebuke and Nadine Kazuba. What's happening, family? How y'all doing?
Great.
Peace. Excited to be here.
Hey,
Appreciate
Claude,
it.
Here.
did I jack your name up, Claude, or what, man?
No, you got it right. That's
Okay.
exactly how you say it.
All right.
Yeah.
I ain't want no problems. You know what I'm saying? But anyway,
it wouldn't be nothing, right?
you already know. Look at that. He coming in the gate. He kicking it down already. But man, welcome to Riot Starter TV, man. Appreciate y'all coming on. Yeah. What I would like to do is start off by you all giving an introduction of yourself, who you are, and why you qualified to step up and talk about Rwanda.
Yeah, so usually it's ladies first, but I'll go ahead and start. Um, so as you say, my name is Claude Gatebuke. I'm originally from Rwanda. I consider myself a global African. So just like I consider a Black person around the world. We all have the same right to claim Africa. So I claim myself a global African, but originally from Rwanda. I fled the genocide. The word that you used, fled. I did flee. I escaped the genocide and the war in Rwanda as a young teen, and I'm a human rights activist. Based in the U.S. And also executive director of the African Great Lakes Action Network, which is an organization that works on our focus and our mission is to bring peace, justice, and prosperity in the Great Lakes region of Africa. And I work closely with Nadine, especially when it comes to raising awareness and making sure that the world knows. And we have a saying that, the world must know. I had a book right here, but, I'm going to pull it up in a little bit, show it to y'all, where the world must know. So that's a little bit about myself. I'll turn it over to Nadine.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to come on Black Power Media to talk about Rwanda, to talk about those things that we never hear about in the mainstream media. But my name is Nadine Kazuba, and I was born and raised in Rwanda until I was 13 when the war broke out. So I left Rwanda. I went to live in Kenya. I lived in Kenya for 4 years, and then came in U.S. as a refugee in 1999. So I pretty much finished my high school in U.S. and then I went to college. I'm currently working as a registered nurse, but I also have a degree in international studies. On the top of that, I'm also a Rwandan activist. So yeah, that's my story.
No doubt, no doubt. Again, welcome, and I have a suspicion that you all will be coming back soon on Black Power Media. We'll talk about that later on. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
but
Sounds like a plan.
no doubt,
I'm down for it.
Yeah.
no doubt, no doubt. So I want to, for folks who, one of the things that I pride myself in regards to Riot Started TV is not taking for granted, what people may know or not know. You know what I'm saying? Because oftentimes when we're activists and freedom fighters and so on and so forth, we speak different language and terminology, terms and so on and so forth, and we use them so loosely that we think that everybody knows what's going on. So what I would like to do is start off by getting a history of Rwanda, where it's at geographically, and what is the Rwanda you knew coming up as youth.
Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll start with that part of geography and history of Rwanda. So for those who don't know, Rwanda, it's an East African country, and it borders with Uganda in the north, Burundi in the south. There is Tanzania on the east side of Rwanda, and then Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo on the west side of Rwanda. So that's the geography of Rwanda. And then also we're gonna talk about a little brief of history about the country of Rwanda, because it's important that we talk about history, because it kind of helps in understanding exactly the roots of the conflict, because our conflict has something to do with the history for the main part. So the conflict it's pretty much, we're going to talk about the ethnicities of Rwanda, the three ethnicities of Rwanda. So Rwanda has three ethnic groups, Hutus, Twas, and Tutsis. So the first inhabitants of Rwanda are believed to be Twas, and Twas are hunter-gatherers groups. And Hutus, they came as second inhabitants of Rwanda. And the history says that they came during the Bantu migration, the Great Bantu migration from the West Africa towards the East and Southern. So Hutus are Bantus, and they came and they settled in Rwanda with the Twas. Twas is TWA. I bet some people probably haven't heard, because when they talk about conflicts of Rwanda, they only mentioned Hutus and Tutsis.
Right.
But we have also Twas. So the Hutus, they came, they settled in Rwanda, they started living with the Twas. And by the way, the percentages of Hutus in Rwanda is 84% of the population. So they are the majority. And then Twas makes 1%. So the third ethnic group that came to live in Rwanda are Tutsis. So it's the history says that Tutsis came in Rwanda during the 14th century. So Tutsis came from the northeastern part of Rwanda along the Nile River, and they came and settled in Rwanda. So when they arrived in Rwanda, they found Hutus and Twas already living there in their communities. They had their structured system of governance. They had their own kings and their own kingdom and stuff like that. So the Tutsis came and settled with them. And also they adapted the languages, because they adapted the language that was being spoken. Because Rwanda, we speak a language called Kinyarwanda. And Kinyarwanda is believed to be, it's a Bantu language. And so Hutus, as they are Bantus, so they're the ones who pretty much spoke the Kinyarwanda. So Tutsis came and they lived together with the Hutus and Twas. There was the some of them married with each other, so there was intermarriages and all kinds of things. And then around 16th century, some Tutsis, they managed to overthrow the kingdoms of Hutus that were already there. So they took over, they established a kingdom of Tutsi. So Rwanda was under rule of Tutsi kingdom for 400 years, from around 16th, 17th centuries up to 1959, when there was a revolution. So during the time of the kingdom, Hutus, because Tutsis came and overthrew their kingdoms, Hutus were subjugated to hard labor, slavery, and all kinds of injustices that was being done on Hutus, like during the whole entire monarchy of Tutsis in Rwanda. So also during that time, during the monarchy period,
I think you went a little bit fast, just so that the audience knows the kingdom was a monarchy. So it was just one family basically ruled the country of Rwanda,
correct,
you know, for hundreds of years. Keep going.
yeah, and the monarchy was Tutsi. So so again, the Hutus became second class. They were subjugated to hard labor and all kinds of injustices and stuff. Also during that time, like around 1899, after the Berlin Conference, Rwanda was colonized by the Germans. So Germans were the first European country to colonize Rwanda. So when Germans came to Rwanda, they found the Tutsi kingdom already in place. They didn't overthrow the kingdom. They actually worked with the king, and the injustice that was already there, it kept going like as usual. They actually facilitated the king to keep doing whatever he was doing, pretty much throwing all these injustices to Hutus like it was before. And then after World War II, Rwanda was given to Belgium. So the Germans left.
Just it's World War One, not two.
World War One, I'm
just
sorry.
making sure. Yeah, there we
Yes.
got that accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And teamwork going here. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know. It's a 1-2 punch. It's
So
lightning
good.
and thunder. Lightning and thunder.
That's good.
Yes,
That's
it's
good.
it's after World War One. So German was defeated, and Rwanda was given to Belgium. So the Belgium came, and they colonized, and they kept working with the king. So nothing changed. Hutus kept being subjugated to injustice and all kinds of hard labor, like all kinds of mistreatments. But even though during that time, even though all those stuff were going on, there were few of the missionaries, like European missionaries, who came during the colonization, who were kind of looking at what was happening, and they'd be like, okay, this is too much. Like, these Hutus really are having a hard time. You know, they're going through a lot. So some of them have written actually stuff about it. And then also it came by, like during 1950, there were a few groups of Hutus who stood up and say, okay, enough is enough. We want equal treatments. We want to be a part of the kingdom governance. We want our children to attend schools, just like Tutsis children attend schools, because good schools were only allowed for Tutsis. Like Hutu children were not really allowed to attend good schools or get a better education like Tutsi children. So they started raising awareness of what was happening, and also that was coming with a price, because they were being harassed. They were being threatened for what they were doing by the Tutsi mobs who will harass them. They will get beaten. Some of them even lost their lives. But I will give also credit, because during that movement, when the Hutus started raising awareness, there were like very few Tutsis who also sided with the Hutus, and they were like, yeah, these Hutus definitely, they deserve better. They deserve to be treated like Rwandans. They shouldn't be going through all of this. And some of the Tutsis were actually a part of the elites. They were part of the kingdom governance of Tutsis. But they were brave enough to stood up and say, yeah, this is enough. They really deserve better. But of course, the majority were Hutus who were demanding the equal rights. They were, and then it came 1959. Tutsi mobs attacked one of the Hutu leaders who was also a part of the movement that was raising awareness. They attacked him, and that sparked the revolution of 1959. So Hutus started revolting. They attacked Tutsis. They burned their houses. They chased them out of the country. They abolished the Tutsi monarchy. And also during that time, 1959, that was the time a lot of African countries were getting independence from the colonial rule. So Rwanda was also getting independence from the Belgium. So they held some democratic elections, and Hutus won by the majority vote. So the First Republic was created in 1962, and the Tutsi kingdom was abolished. And so a lot of Tutsi left. They went to neighboring countries, to Uganda. Uganda was primarily the first country that received most of Tutsis. Some went to Tanzania, Congo, and Burundi. So, and then Rwanda became a republic, and the first president was a Hutu. His name is Gregoire Kayibanda. And then I'll hand it over to Claude Gatebuke. So that's pretty much a little bit history about Rwanda and the root of the conflict. So Claude Gatebuke can tell us more about pre-genocide.
And that's cool because that was a great history lesson going back, opposed to just saying it started right here in the 90s and that's just it. You know what I mean? So definitely appreciate that. Claude got his mic on mute, I think.
I was just practicing what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay.
That history lesson. I think Nadine, you're gonna have to start charging for being able to compress so much history in such little time. Man. But there's a couple of things I wanted to add. The treatment of Rwandans by the colonialists, which Rwanda is part of a region, the Great Lakes region of Africa. Initially, it was a German colony, as Nadine said. It was part of a colony with Tanzania, Burundi, and Tanzania. Then, when the Belgians lost the colonies, Rwanda became a colony of Belgium and Burundi also, and they were basically a part of. There was the Belgian Congo, which was one of the most violent colonial histories, where the amputating of hands and feet started. So the colonialists in Rwanda were also, they introduced an additional level of violence in terms of the beatings of people for not working. But the other thing that they introduced, that we're gonna get to see a little bit of this legacy of colonialism, was the ethnic groups that Nadine talked about. They were formalized. They introduced an identity card that actually showed this person is Hutu and that person is Tutsi and this person is Twa, which before that Rwanda was being an agricultural and farming community. They didn't have this kind of documentation. But fast forward, we'll get to see a little bit on that. So Nadine stopped in the first, when Rwanda first became a republic, and the very first president. During that time, also, one thing that is to be noted, and for historical record, in the 60s, Rwanda was at war. From 1960, I believe it was 62 to 67, the exiled Tutsis who fled Rwanda when the revolution took place and left with the king and everything, they were attacking Rwanda from various border posts or from various parts of Rwanda. They didn't succeed at taking over, and initially, so many people have heard this term of Tutsis being referred to as cockroaches in the 90s, during the genocide. But the initial use of this name was actually during these very first attacks, and this was not by the Rwandans inside of the country, but by the attacking rebels. They actually called themselves the Inyenzi is the word. It was an acronym. The acronym was, you know, for a long sentence. Ingangurarugo yiyemeje kuba ingenzi or something like that, which, you know, they translated, they acronymed into Inyenzi, which in Kinyarwanda is a cockroach. So for many years, you know, basically they were referred to that way. And then, of course, after that very first president of Rwanda, well, the second, it was technically the second president, but the first democratically elected president of Rwanda was actually ousted in a coup in the 70s. And if anybody, you know, for those of you who pay attention to African history, the 70s and the 80s, especially the 70s, were rife with coups by military leaders. Rwanda was no different. Rwanda became a military dictatorship, a single party state for more than 20 years. When the 20 years in 1990, so it was actually 17 years later, 1990, there was another attack on Rwanda. And the attack on Rwanda was by, remember in the 60s, the people who left with the king, you know, were attacking, but they never succeeded. This time it's the next generation. The next generation attacked. They had been a part of the Ugandan military. They basically left with equipment from the Ugandan military. They were equipped by the Ugandan military. And we'll get into it a little bit later, but neither Rwanda nor Uganda is a manufacturer of weapons. Both are very poor countries. So this war itself actually had a big hand of the West in it, and we'll get into that. It was an imperially supported war, and so that's kind of the background leading up to the war. The war lasted 4 years. In those 4 years culminated in what is known as the Rwandan genocide. So for 4 years, most people, when they hear about Rwanda, they know two things: Hotel Rwanda, the movie, or the genocide in Rwanda. And you would think that Rwanda started in 1994, but that's not the case. You know, Rwanda, as Nadine explained, is a country that's been around since the 14th, 15th, century, at least that we know of. It that's been inhabited for that long. Right. So the period from 1990, and we're gonna do the 1-2 punch, the lightning and thunder here. Nadine, feel free to jump in, as we talk about that period.
Yes, what I was trying to say, it's not even the 14th century, because 14th centuries, that's the time the first group of Tutsis arrived in Rwanda. So Rwanda's been there way longer. Nobody knows for how long, because the first inhabitants being Twas. Nobody knows. It's just been there for just like any other nation. It had people that were created there and put there by God.
Yeah. Real quick question. So the Twa, we were always taught that they were great astrologers. Is that a true statement?
They are.
Okay.
They are. They're great at many things, including astrology, but also, they're great hunters. They're great, gatherers.
Right.
And also, they were good warriors. From the history books, they're a type of people that, if you had them in your army and military, it was a good group to have. But also, if I can finish this thought, they've been so oppressed by all of the subsequent, various leaders, that community is actually on the brink of extinction in Rwanda. There is less than 30,000 Twas in Rwanda, so they're not even 1% of the population at this point. Nadine, go ahead.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to add on. Like back in the history, Twas, Hutus respected Twas when it comes to, they used to say if there was like a lack of rain, because sometimes they'll have like dry seasons and there is no rain. So the first person you had to go to ask was a Twa. because they could actually do some kind of magical things, and
Astrology, right?
it will start raining. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, those are things that we had heard, but you know what I'm saying, like I said, you know, sometimes we don't know. You know, we come up with all types of things. So, you know, I wanted to go to the source and see what you all had to say. You know, you all being I know Claude's an expert in all types of things. So I wanted to go right to it.
I
But
appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yeah.
nah, but you know, I wanted to when we talk about the whole the genocide, right? So you're saying that the genocide was the war itself began 4 years before the actual genocide.
Yep.
How did that how did it transition to that particular point?
I think that's a really important and critical period to talk about. And again, Nadine, feel free to jump in here. But you know, to make it quick and summarized, you know, as I said, the war started in Uganda. It was an invasion by exiled Rwandans who were actually a part of the Ugandan military, top leadership of the Rwandan military, including Paul Kagame, who is now the president of Rwanda. Now, Paul Kagame at the time was the chief of intelligence in Uganda in training in America at Fort Leavenworth when the war first started. So it wasn't until days later when the initial leader, Fred Wigema, was assassinated or killed in the war that he came and Kagame started leading this war. And there's a few things that are to be that need to be known and said that are little known about what led up to the genocide, the brutality of this war. The rebels, known as the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, who are now the party in power in Rwanda because they actually ended up winning that war 4 years later after the genocide. Basically, there was so much brutality in this war, they would call people to meetings, hundreds of people to these meetings. So everybody watching this stream exponentially, and they would bring them together and they would surround them, throw grenades into the crowds, you know, kill people with hand weapons, things like hammers and clubs and small hoes. There's actually a famous weapon that they use. It's called it's known as agafuni. Agafuni is the back of a hoe that they use to bash people's heads in. Wow. And this, they were not discriminating on age or gender or anything like that. It just killed all kinds of people. Hundreds and thousands of people were killed. And what that led to, so the brutality of that war and the massacres by these rebels led to, and remember, the exiled group was predominantly Tutsi. So the RPF was and still is a predominantly Tutsi party. They that war led to a refugee crisis. In the space of 3 years, 1 million people in Rwanda fled their homes, became homeless, went to live in tent cities inside of Kigali. And if I can put it in perspective, there was 8 million people total in Rwanda. So 1 million is more than 10% of the population. So think of it this way. If you took America and got more than 30 million people to move in the space of 3 years from one part of the country to one city, doesn't matter what city. It could be Atlanta, it can be New York, it can be LA, it can be any city with the greatest infrastructure. It will still be a big problem in that city. I mean, you know, the groceries. I mean, we saw that during the pandemic last year. I mean, I'm sure nobody will find toilet paper then. You know, if you got that many people moving into one city at the same time, that many people. Or if I can use a different analogy, if you take every Black person in America, move them to one city at the same time. There is, what, 41, 42 million of us. If you take all of us and took us to one city in the space of 3 years, that's what was happening in Rwanda. in addition to the refugee crisis, there was weapons galore everywhere, all over the country, were these war weapons that were just like, it was, they were so widespread that for me as a child, a preteen, it was cheaper for me to buy a grenade than it was for me to buy a bottle of soda or a loaf of bread. And so weapons started being used for normal crime like burglary and other, so people would just come with machine guns, to rob a bar or to
Wow.
rob a home. They throw grenades through windows and things like that. And then there were terror attacks by the rebels in various parts. So if we use if we use like public places, think of places like a place like Grand Central Station, where you have so many people, or Port Authority in New York, or so many other places like a stadium. If you think of a stadium with thousands and thousands of people, and they will start setting off explosives. So on public transportation, in markets, in all kinds of places. In addition, so that's not everything. There was also assassination of politicians. And every time a politician was assassinated, the rebels blamed the government, but it also led to riots and sometimes massacres.
And also, yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, I would like to add in, because during that time when the war started in 90, like around towards the end of actually right before, no, it was after the war. It was after the war in 90, where the Rwandan government eventually decided to adopt a multi-party system. So we came from one party system that was in place from 1973, and they accepted the open, we accepted democracy pretty much. The Rwandan government accepted the democracy. So people started creating political parties. And so during that time, a lot of politicians who were being killed, they were people from the opposition parties. So the parties that doesn't speak the same language as the government, as the party on the power. So every time those politicians were being killed, the first blame will be the government of Rwanda, that was running the country then. So they will always blame them, because they will think, okay, they are killing opposition leaders, but people will not even think about the rebels, what the rebels are doing, because they actually started sending the informers, the infiltrates, into the country, so they can cause all those chaos, so that way the government can be blamed for all the crimes that are being committed. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. Claude, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important. The point that you raised, those 2 points, as I said, leading up to the war, Rwanda was a single party system. And then the war started in 90. And then in 91, the Rwanda adopted a multi-party system, which these parties now created their youth wings. And the youth wings would have all these riots. And as kids, we didn't know that we would make it home, when these riots were taking place in the streets. Now, what we've learned now since, there were people from the RPF who had infiltrated every aspect of life in Rwanda, political and non-political, the leadership and administrative, to every level. I mean, down to 10 houses in the neighborhood. And in that, and during that time, as they were, they had infiltrated the the military, the political part, every single one. They were causing chaos, again, to make Rwanda so insecure that it was not a livable place. Now, we have heard testimony from those who had actually infiltrated all of these various institutions in the various aspects of life. We have also heard from leaders today in Rwanda admitting and bragging that they actually had this. One of them being one of the top leaders of the RPF. His name is Tito Rutaremara, saying that they had infiltrated pretty much every sector of life inside of Rwanda. So during that war, the 4-year war, there were multiple ceasefires. They were also violated by the rebels. There was also a peace deal, a peace deal that was negotiated between the government and the rebels. And while all of this was happening, April 6, 1994, I'm sure April 6 means nothing to most people watching this unless it's your birthday. But to Rwandans, it's a very important day because Rwandans born and unborn on that day, our lives changed. Because that is the day that the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, and this is according to their own soldiers who have confessed to shooting down the plane carrying the Rwandan and the Burundian president who were coming from that peace, the negotiating of that peace deal and the ceasefire. They were killed instantly, and that's what sparked the genocide in 1994. And I want to stop here and get Nadine's additions here before we get into the genocide, and I'll share a little bit of my story on how I survived the genocide.
No doubt. Y'all making my job easy today. I just want y'all to know that because of the fact that, it's not a question of you having to learn it. You know what I'm saying? Just witnessing it is always, always takes it to where you need to go. But go ahead, Nadine. Let us.
Yeah. So yeah, and like he said before, like right before they shut down the presidential plane. So the president was together with the president of Burundi. They were actually traveling in the same plane. It was the Rwandan president's private jet. So they were coming from the Tanzania in a city called Arusha. So Arusha, Tanzania became the mediator of a peace deal between Rwandan government and the Tutsi rebels, the RPF. So while they were coming from one of the meetings that they had to have during that time, that's when they shut down his presidential plane while he was landing in the capital city of Kigali. And people may wonder, how did that happen if the country was being run by him and then he gets shot while he was landing in the capital city? So during the peace deal, like during the whole process of the peace deal, they came a point where they agreed to join the forces, the military, the rebels and the Rwandan military. They had to mix for, it was like a process towards the peace deal. So they accepted to join the forces, like the rebels mixing with the Rwandan military. So during that time, there was a deal that said the RPF is allowed to get to bring in a battalion of its own rebels, 600, I believe. They allowed them to come in the capital city of Kigali, and they gave them the Parliament House as the place to live during the whole time the peace deal was going on. And apparently it was for them to be there and protect some of the authorities who were part of the peace deal that were living in Kigali during the process. So they allowed them to come, but even though they were there, they had to be controlled. There had to be somebody making sure that they are following all the rules that are supposed to be going along with the peace deal. So the people were responsible to do that. It was United Nations, the UN peacekeepers that were in Rwanda. They were responsible to make sure that RPF is following all the rules, that their military is not committing crimes, their military is not doing other things that they're not supposed to do. And they had to do that to RPF, and they also had to do that on Rwandan troops, the governmental troops. But UN did not do its job, because all during that time, the 600 number of rebels that were housed in Kigali, apparently it was like more than double of. They kept infiltrating more and more troops. Right. So So they had to they had something that they said they need to go bring the wood, like in this remote area of Rwanda. They said they couldn't use the wood that was found in Kigali. They just had to go fetch the wood in this remote area where they actually had a territory, because during war they had occupied some territories of Rwanda. So they always requested, yeah, we have to go get the wood in that area. And every time they will go, they will bring more troops in. So if they go, like if it's only 10 rebels going to fetch the wood, they will bring more 10 military along with them. And also they will bring in weapons. Sometimes they'll say they have the wood, but underneath they have weapons. So they kept infiltrating that way. And when they shut down the presidential plane, a part of those troops that were housed in Kigali, they are the ones who shut down the presidential plane. And I'm saying this because there have been a lot of investigations that have been conducted by several experts. And they always point out that RPF was responsible for shooting down the presidential plane. But most of the time, those investigations, they get stopped and people get threatened to actually show the public what exactly happened.
Nadine, not only is it expert reports, but we also have testimony. I have personally spoken to one of Kagame's former guards. His name is Alois Rienzi. Alois Rienzi himself told me he was in a meeting at the end of March in 1994. So this is like a week, maybe a couple of weeks before the shooting of the plane. And one of the people in the meeting with Kagame and some of his high-ranking officers, including one named Kayumba Nyamwasa, this man who used to be a part of the intelligence in Rwanda previously, pulled out a map and showed them where they would shoot the plane. This is direct testimony. He's given this testimony publicly. He's given it in court, but I've also personally spoken to him, and he's given me this testimony. There's also another
real
former.
Quick, where is he located now? Is he in the United States, or where is this guy?
No, he's located in Europe.
Okay.
He's in Europe. Another one based in Europe. His name is James Nyandinda, was also a guard of President Kagame. He is also given me his testimony and said Paul Kagame was responsible for the shooting of the plane. These are two of his guards. And then everybody else that's testified, that's spoken about the shooting of the plane, was somebody that was associated with Kagame. Another one, who was another presidential guard, was ready to testify about it in court. While he was in Kenya, he was snatched up. This was in 2015. He was snatched up and he was never seen again. So all of that to say, there is so many expert reports, but also so much testimony, to talk about, the shooting of this plane. There's also a film by the BBC called Untold Stories, Rwanda's Untold Stories, that actually, has so many of these former RPF people talking about the shooting of the plane and how it all went down. Nadine, sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to add to the reports that there's also this testimony.
Yeah. So besides that, there is those testimonies. There is the investigation that been conducted, and they all direct to show that RPF was responsible of shooting down the presidential plane. But again, all those infiltration also by the RPF were done while the peacekeepers of the United Nations were on the site, were in Rwanda, and they were supposed to control all those movements, but they never did it. So to the point where a lot of Rwandans feel like UN was accomplice. They were favoring RPF. They had a plan to let them take over the country. So they shoot down the presidential plane. Everything escalated. They started killing Tutsis. And then the rebels started fighting, and they actually started fighting right after they shut down the presidential plane. The war started immediately.
Wow.
They started shooting people. The Tutsis started dying, and then Hutus were also dying in the areas where the rebels were controlling, or the areas where they sometimes they will infiltrate. They will mix together with the militias, the extremist Hutus who were killing Tutsis. There were some Tutsis among those actually who were also fueling the conflict, killing Tutsis at the same time. So everything became a chaos. Like the government was also like, it's like you chopped off the head of the government, because if you shoot down the president, and the president was not by himself, he was also with the what was that? He was like the chief of the army of the Rwandan.
Yeah, the military chief of staff. Yeah.
Yeah, military chief of staff. He died along. So it's like you completely decapitated the head of the government. So they pretty much had to create the new government to take care of the escalated situation that was going on. So yeah, I mean, it became a chaos. Everybody was scared. Nobody knew what was happening, but we knew it was just that the war has started. People are dying. People are coming to your houses and they will kill you. And I mean, it became too out of control. And it even seemed like the government itself, they didn't know what to do. Everything was completely out of control. Even during that time, the government requested ceasefire, and the RPF refused. And guess what? During that, the Tutsis were dying, and Hutus were dying, Rwandans were dying, but the rebels did not want any ceasefire. The objective was to take over the country. Yeah, so I'll give Claude Gatebuke, I'll hand over to you so you can continue with the story.
Yeah. Actually, I want to share what it was like from the eyes of a child, when it happened. But some of the things that Nadine's talked about are really, they're important details, because not only did the RPF refuse, it seems like maybe this live cast has gotten hacked, which is not unusual. When you're talking about Rwanda.
That's wild, because of the fact that I'm seeing in the chat folks saying they got cut off. Anyone if folks can hear us, put in the chat that you're still on. Either way, we're recording it, so if we have to take it down and put it back up, then we'll do that. This is just to point out the serious nature of what it is we're dealing with here. You know what I'm saying? This isn't it's not an entertainment situation, so every now and then, we get bumped off, and it's happened on several occasions. But if you guys are in the chat, I'm seeing it's back up. Yes, in the chat. Okay, cool.
So I think we probably should have said this at the beginning of the broadcast.
It's all good. We rocking. Let's go.
We always get hacked. Every broadcast that we do gets hacked. I've actually heard from the manager of the Afrobeat radio. He's told me, and also a number of radio stations in various parts of the world, in Jamaica, in Australia, and they say every time we have you on, we get hacked. Nadine knows this. We have so many live casts that get hacked. So
I brought the wrong people on. I was supposed to put.
That's right. Don't be surprised if it happens. But back to what we were saying here. It's important to note the RPF was not interested. It's presented today as they present themselves as having stopped the genocide. But in fact, they were exploiting the genocide, participating in the genocide. Now we know that based on testimony and based on people who actually were a part of it. In addition to that, the RPF actually stopped the intervention to stop the fighting so that people's lives could be saved. So not only did they refuse a ceasefire. Now, I'm not saying I have all of this faith in the UN, but the RPF itself took the initiative, went to the UN, and told, and basically say they sent a letter on April 28th or 29th I'm not sure the exact date, but it was either the 28th or the 29th of April 1994. This is 3 weeks, 3 weeks after the genocide started, and said, "Do not intervene, because all the Tutsis that were to be killed have been killed, and the genocide is over. There's no point. There's nobody to save." This letter was written by one Claude Gatebuke and Gerald Gahima. Gerald Gahima went on to become, I believe he was a minister of justice, which I call it the Ministry of Injustice, the Minister of Injustice in Rwanda, because of the things that they've done to the people, and also a prosecutor, like the Attorney General, if you will, if we compare it to the U.S. or the top prosecutor in any other country. These are the people who basically say, no, do not stop the war, and it went on. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and from my eyes as a child, when they told us that the president's plane had been shot, knowing everything that had happened, leading up to it, especially with the assassinations of politicians, I say to my mom and sisters, I was like, man, I hope the president didn't die, because if he died, we're not going to be able to finish the soccer tournament. We were in the middle of a soccer tournament, and that's what I was worried about as a child. But that all turned quickly, because, as Nadine described, shootings and bombing started. I mean, I would hear explosions on one side, a boom sound, and then it would whistle over our heads, and boom, it would explode on the other side. And that was it happened so often. We actually started, like, we got used to it. We were like, okay, the timing, oh, there's the sound, oh, there's the whistle, now the explosion. It felt like everything was crumbling around me. I was hearing people screaming and crying for help. As Nadine said, extremist Hutus started butchering Tutsis. We definitely lost the stream online. They started butchering Tutsis, killing them with machetes and knives and all kinds of hand weapons, and it was total chaos. Um, I was, we went into hiding, myself and my mom and my two sisters, and we ended up basically, um, we we were rescued from our home by some neighbors. Um, and we were afraid because people were in our house every night looking, searching for us and looking to kill us. We were sheltered by Hutu neighbors. We ended up escaping the city of Kigali, again, rescued by a Hutu man, a driver who put his life on the line and rescued so many people. And we kept getting stopped at so many checkpoints. They wanted to kill us, and they would negotiate. At every one of those turns, somebody would intervene. And if I can describe the scene in Kigali, in Rwanda at the time, there was, how can I put it? If you look at the sky, it was covered with a big dark mushroom, if you will. It was like all dark because of the smoke, the burning structures, the dust from all of these structures being destroyed. The smell was so bad because of the decomposing human flesh mixed with gunpowder, mixed with smoke, mixed with dust. It was just like, you couldn't, walking outside, you wanted to throw up. So we fled, and at one point, me and my mother were pulled out of a truck and ordered to dig our own grave. And Kalonji, I believe this is a part of the story that you saw, where my sister was retelling the story. So their children, they saw us walked away to go and be killed. But this driver did not give up, and the neighbors didn't give up. People we don't know, they showed up, and they came and they negotiated, and they just kept, pushing and pushing and pushing, and eventually, the driver came with these two men, and the two men negotiated for us. One of the men said, "Don't kill this boy and his mom. Let somebody else kill them, because they're not going to make it 5 miles from here." This was
How old were you at this time? Not to
14.
cut you off. You was
14.
14 years old, and it's you
Yeah.
and your mother, and they're pretty much uh, telling you to dig your own grave.
Yep. They made us dig our own grave. And the neighbors, some women, older men, and some children rushed and started yelling at them. And, this is where it's important that everyone understands every voice matters, every 2 feet matters. It's got to be, you got to speak up and do something, because they distracted them long enough for the driver to come back, bring the negotiators who engaged them for hours and hours and hours. We got to this place, it was mid-afternoon, it was pitch black when we left this place, when this man said the words, "This boy and his mom are not going to make it 5 miles from here, let somebody else kill them." And somehow they agreed to it. And we left. We ended up in a town bordering the Congo, and that's where we that's where we stayed. So I just wanted to give a personal perspective and the eyes of a child on how I survived the Rwandan genocide. And every one of us has a story. And if we went into it, we will go all day. But I just wanted to kind of share that so that the audience can kind of see it from somebody that was living it. The
I,
rebels continue to bomb the country
right.
like crazy.
I want to get to that, but because of the fact that we're hearing you say about you're hearing the bombs, you're smelling the carnage, and I hate to use that word, but you are you're basically on the run. You're with your mother, and they're like dig your own grave, they're negotiating, so on and so forth. What was the scenery like as you're traveling? You're seeing bodies everywhere. I mean, I've seen pictures.
Yeah.
I don't know if people have seen this. I've seen pictures. In fact, one of the pictures that are used for the the YouTube channel of skulls upon skulls and different types of bones and so on and so forth. Can you give And I don't. It's not to seem graphic, but I need people to understand what we're talking about here, and it's not just the movie Hotel Rwanda. You understand what I'm saying? It's not a Hollywood depiction. Take us to where you were at 14 and just traveling down the street. What was that like? You know what I'm saying?
A couple of things. The piling bodies on the side of the streets or in the woods was a recurring scene at the various checkpoints where we got stopped, and they would point into the woods and show us that's where you're going to end up. And many times they would stop and basically say, we're going to wait until we've gathered enough people to kill. That's one thing. The other personal testimony, after we fled our house, I actually went back because we needed to travel with my father's ID. And I went back home to go and retrieve the bag that had that ID. And I literally saw my next door neighbor chase down a boy that I grew up with. I know you asked not to be graphic, but
No, it's
I
cool.
have
I'm
to
just
tell
saying.
this story,
Yeah.
and then that will probably seal the deal, and we can continue.
Right.
But he chased this boy down. He was a little bit older than me. He chopped him to death with a machete in front of everybody. He turned to me, and when he came to kill me, one of the guys who was there said, "Don't touch that boy. If you touch him, I'm gonna throw this grenade, and it's either gonna kill all of us or it's gonna cut everybody's legs off." And that's how I was spared. But I got to see that scene. Not that wasn't the only graphic or horror scene that I saw, but if you can just imagine body parts in various places. When the rebels would come at night to raid the neighborhood, they would also kill people and shoot people. And you would wake up in the morning and you find legs or arms, body parts in different, in the yard or on the street. So it was just a horrible scene to see when it first started.
And also, I would like to add in, there is also like that whole story is happening in the area that is supposedly to be controlled by the government. So this was mainly the time when the genocide against Tutsis was happening. So Hutu militias and extremist Hutus are killing Tutsis. But Also, there's testimonies that have come out where we found out that actually during that time there were some infiltrates, the Tutsi rebel infiltrates, who were coming disguised as Hutu militias, and they will kill people, and then they will go back, and all that will be attributed to the Hutu militias and extremist Hutus who were killing Tutsis. So it was a total mess.
Yeah, and also yes, these militias that were killing so many people and that threatening to kill us, it was a mix. You know, some of them now we know that these were not just the extremist Hutus who were committing these massacres, but they were also Tutsi rebels mixed with them that were doing this again on testimony by either those who infiltrated or some of them um, were, you know, the leaders of the RPF have testified or bragged about this, you know, bragged about having those people involved. And also, depending on what part of what was, you know, who the area was under control, massacres were being committed by the extremist Hutus or the extremist Tutsis in those rebels. You know, I also have video testimony from some of the ones who were involved in what they called the cleaning group, which that cleaning group within the RPF, basically what they did was they would come after they took over an area, and those were the ones who were in charge of committing the massacres. I mean, at some point they killed so many people that even when they got a day off and they said, oh, you know, you're tired, your arms are tired from hacking people to death, you know, take 2 or 3 days off. They will bring them back a day later because they were like, we got way too many people to kill. That's how bad it was. Again,
you said the clinging group or cleaning?
Clean, like, you know, like wiping.
Okay.
You know, basically
okay.
they were there to wipe out, you know, to wipe out whoever was left. Right. The parts occupied by the RPF were ghost towns. However, again, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that as the violence that we're describing here, we survived because so many people intervened and helped us survive. People spoke up, people intervened. And so when we describe this type of violence, I know there's a tendency to look at us as Africans or as Black people as just violent people, you know, for no reason. And that is not true. There, you know, these are groups that were trained and also had an objective to actually do the killing because of their own selfish reasons. And on top of that, they were sponsored by the Western imperialists. So all of this needs to be in the context of this isn't just Africans killing Africans. This is Africans killing Africans with the sponsorship of the West. And that actually happens even later because we end up fleeing into the Congo because the rebels took over. You know, the RPF took over Rwanda. They bombed everything. Every goat, every chicken, every person, every baby, every old woman and man, you know, in their way, they killed, they shot, they bombed. And so we were pushed into the Congo. We were met with disease and disaster.
I would like to add on something. Yeah. The RPF rebels, the RPF soldiers, the Tutsi rebels, they have this term called kufagia, which means it's a Swahili word that means how you call it, like pretty much
right?
is wipe everything, you know. Mm-hmm. We have kufagia. They everywhere they have to go, they have to wipe out everything. Yeah, so which means kill everybody, babies, moms, men, everything.
It's like sweeping, like right. Wiping or sweeping.
Right. Yeah. I want to. I mean, there's so much to unpack. I definitely want to deal with the history of Paul Kagame, but at the same time, I want to talk about because you all mentioned massacres, and I know that there was a situation that the Bayumba Stadium.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, can you talk about that because of the fact that again I'm just trying to paint this picture of what we dealing with here.
The Byumba massacre, the stadium massacre, actually also is one of the largest massacres that happened in one place in '94. It was Byumba was one of the first places occupied um, in by the RPF for those 4 years, and during that time they basically gathered as many people as they can. They filled the stadium, surrounded the stadium, and then they pretty much killed everybody in that stadium. This is to give a picture of, what actually happened to people in those areas. Why I was saying that I'm glad you brought it up, because the Byumba massacre basically actually does show why the areas controlled by the RPF were ghost towns. They were massacring whoever didn't flee, like the million people who fled. They killed them. Some people did get saved. No doubt there were people who were saved by the RPF, but it was usually in a discriminatory manner. They would select people by ethnicity and usually save the Tutsis and kill the Hutus and Twas. But at the Byumba massacre stadium, the Byumba Stadium massacre, they packed it up with people.
And also, I would like to mention that with the Byumba massacre, there was one of the largest displaced people's camp that was in Kigali. It was like in an outskirts of the city of Kigali. So that refugee camp, when RPF attacked, so it was pretty much also close to the Byumba area. So when they attacked, some of the refugees were directed to go to Byumba area, and also some people who were being caught in the middle, because sometimes the RPF will just attack and they will take over the area, and by the time you wake up in the morning, they are already there. They occupy the area. So some people got moved to go to Byumba. Like most of the people were being moved to go to Byumba to, they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know that they were going there to be killed. Because most of the time they would say, everybody has to go to Byumba, and then after Byumba, people can start going back to their homes. But so yeah, one of those refugees, like a lot of refugees that were in the particular camp, those who did not die, they were pushed to go to Byumba. And of course, some ended up in Byumba Stadium. Go ahead, Claude.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much. And if we can give a reference, there's a book called "In Praise of Blood" by Judy River, an investigative journalist from Canada, that based her book on 20 years of research, but also testimony of survivors and actually perpetrators and so many of the people involved. That this book, it's called "In Praise of Blood: The Crimes of the RPF." Again, "In Praise of Blood" by Judy River. If you can check that book out, it actually has a lot of this history, including this Byumba massacre, and a lot of what actually happened in the Congo and to the Congolese people.
We're gonna get a book list and film list of required reading and viewing from you guys. So
right.
for folks that's interested in that, look out for it on a Twitter feed. And if it's a lot of books like we suspect, we'll put it in the description of the video. I know that a few folks have complained that they had to refresh several times. Don't worry about it. We're recording it. So if in the event that any funny business takes place, we'll repost it. Don't even trip. But I want to talk about this guy that so many folks are talking about is a great man. He's a Pan-Africanist, so on and so forth. I want to talk about his history, because one of the things that you pointed out was the fact that he was trained at Leavenworth. Now, if you were trained at Leavenworth, I mean, if you know anything about anything, you got to be one ruthless ass traitor. So I would really like you to let's talk about Paul Kagame. What like who is this guy? What's his history?
I can start with that part. So like pretty much, if you look back what we just said, how the army that he was leading, how he was massacring people, there is no way you can say, okay, this guy stopped genocide. I mean, you came massacring people. The people that you were supposed to save, you are killing them. There is no way you can actually say that you stopped the genocide. And that's one thing he gets credit for. He gets a credit saying that he has stopped the genocide. No, he hasn't, because also that's some stuff we'll be talking about. Yeah, because it looks like genocide continued in Rwanda, but in a different manner.
Right.
So besides that, also, yeah, he has all these credits. Like, we also have to check out who is saying, who is putting this propaganda out there. The media that is propaganda, that is putting out these statements about Kagame being the most progressive leader of Africa, being the savior of Rwanda and everything. We have to check that information, and we always have to question ourselves when we see the people who actually helped him to get on to take over the country are the ones who put that information out there, and they leave all the history behind of how he has been butchering people. So he's not a Pan-Africanist, because a Pan-Africanist wants they want their people to unite. They want their people to progress. They don't want their people to be killed and be massacred like that. Yeah. Also, we have to look, after he took over the country, what happened. There was a lot of imprisonment, and it was the people who are being put in prison. The majority of them are from the Hutu ethnicity. So there was a lot of segregation, a lot of like pretty much, like Claude mentioned, how they have a lot, like he's been saved by a lot of Hutus, like a lot of neighbors who were Hutu, they helped them escape, they helped them, they saved their lives. Some of those Hutu ended up in prison when Kagame took over the country, a lot of them. And what they do, they smear crimes on you. They say, oh yeah, you participated in genocide. They put you in jail. You will stay in jail for years without trial. And some of them are still in there. Most of them have died in the prison. And there are some horrific pictures. You can see how the prison life was back then. It was scary. People were having gangrene. People were dying of hunger. I mean, like a lot of crazy stuff that were going on. The prisons were packed. People could not even find a place to sleep. They had to stand up all the time. So all that stuff happened. There were a lot of injustice, like of putting people in prison. Even young children, like teenagers, they were put in prison. And then besides that, after he took over the country also, there were a lot of killings. Like in 1996, 1997, there were actually a lot of killings when he attacked Congo, because some of the refugees were killed in Congo, a lot of them. Some they kept walking the equatorial forest. Some of them are still in there. We still have refugees. We still have Rwandan refugees in equatorial forest of Congo that have been actually denied the rights of being a refugee by United Nations. They don't get any help from United Nations. They've just adapted to live a forest life. And then they are also a part of those refugees who are forced. They've been pushed to go back to Rwanda by force. And what ended up happening to those refugees, most of them have been killed. They will call them for meetings. Like, this is another thing our Kagame troops do. They will call them for meetings. And once everybody's gathered, you have like 100 people coming for the meetings. They will throw grenades and bombs, and they will kill those refugees. And then they will put them in mass graves. And then sometimes they don't use the mass graves because they know the mass graves can be an indication of evidence. They burn the bodies. There were also several reports how they used to take the bodies in we have this area called Akagera. So they will take the bodies there. They will use gasoline and acid to burn the bodies so that nobody find any evidence. All this stuff are the stuff that happened after Kagame took over the country. And then besides that, there is imprisonment. Like, there is a completely lack of the freedom of speech, like imprisonment of journalists. or any ordinary people who happen to come out and start speaking up. Yeah, we have several names we can mention.
Yeah, Nadine, I want to add to what you're saying about Kagame and him being a Pan-Africanist. I know the question was, is he a Pan-Africanist? Before I even get into why he isn't, I know the other question was, um, who is he? You know, if I can just use an analogy of um, Black history, you know, what we have today is an exploitation of Africa, and especially that area, the Great Lakes region of Africa. The Congo is the richest country in the world in terms of natural resources, with 24 trillion dollars worth of um, minerals and natural resources. It's a country that has the potential to supply all of Africa with electricity that could feed the whole continent of Africa with its agricultural potential. It can provide food security, electricity, and a lot of the basics. And then it has all of these other natural resources, including the equatorial forest, comparable to the Amazon. It's the second largest to the Amazon. The Congo River is second largest to the Amazon. Um, but what Kagame has done with the exploitation of the Congo has been basically the local sellout, the supporter. So let me go to our Black history. During the slave trade, we, the people, were the resources that the Western multinationals were plundering and stealing off of the continent. When this was happening, corporations were doing this, taking our people from the continent to the Americas for profit. Governments were covering up for them with laws and support and diplomatic cover, and the local sellouts were facilitating and helping these Western multinationals to sell our people to these Western nations. There's nobody at this point. I'm pretty sure there's very little number of people today who would say, "Oh, if slavery was happening today, I would support it." In terms of the trade, slave trade, or everybody wants to distance themselves from it because it's in the past. But what's happening in the present is exactly what was happening at that time. And Paul Kagame is one of those local sellouts, like Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, because Rwanda is not rich in natural resources. The question was actually asked in the chat earlier. What are Rwanda's biggest natural resources? One is the people. Rwanda is one of the second most densely populated country in the world. So it has the largest number of people per square mile or per square meter in the world, the second in the world. So it has a lot of people. That's natural resources. It has a lot of coffee and tea. It has limited coltan and cassiterite and other minerals, but the Congo next door has all of it. And what Kagame has done is strike the deal with Western multinationals and Western governments to give him an entry into the Congo, and also Rwanda serves as a transit point for resources stolen out of the Congo and taken to the world market. That's one thing. One of the things that Kagame does. That's who he is. This demonstrating how he's not a Pan-African, because a Pan-African does not exploit Africa, does not exploit Africans. We haven't talked about the millions of Congolese people who've been killed by his troops, but I'm getting there. Rwanda is a supplier of troops where Western countries are not willing to go. So since the American troops getting killed in Somalia in 1993, the U.S. doesn't send their troops in many places. I mean, they've sent them to Iraq and Afghanistan. They don't do it openly. Rwanda is basically the hired mercenary, and a lot of times it's done under the cover of UN peacekeeping missions. Rwanda was in Darfur. Rwanda had peacekeepers in Haiti. Peacekeepers, in quotes. The leader of the peacekeepers, UN peacekeepers in Mali, was a Rwandan general wanted for war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide, who is a part of Kagame's leaders, General Jean Bosco Kazura.
You said he's the leader of what? The UN what now? What?
He
Repeat what you
he
said.
was he's no longer there, but he was hired as a UN missions leader to Mali when Mali had UN peacekeeping troops. In Central African Republic, Rwanda has troops there. Today, Rwanda has troops in Mozambique. So when I say the global African is affected by Kagame, we're talking about the continent of Africa, from Southern Africa in Mozambique to Central Africa in the Central African Republic, to the invasion of the Congo, to the tune that's killed millions, 6 million people in the Congo, to North Africa in Darfur, to West Africa in Mali, and to the diaspora in Haiti. That is what Kagame is. He's an agent of the West. He's a puppet of the US and the UK and the European Union. That is who he is. He does, from time to time lash out at the West when they have disagreements, and that excites a lot of Africans and people of African descent, thinking that he's actually a progressive and a Pan-African leader. But when you look
And
at his record toward Africans, he is nowhere near
and also, I
a
would like to
Pan-African.
say, like when he complains about the West, sometimes I think it's a game. It's a game to keep the his supporters around him, and he knows a lot of Africans. They want somebody who can stand up against the West. So he has a lot of tricks. He can say stuff like that so that he can keep people around. But we we should never go by the words. We should always go by the actions. Because what he says sometimes about the West is totally different by what he does. It's totally different from his own actions. So yeah, go ahead, Claude.
So I mean that kind of answers the question. But then I really want to. You cannot talk about Rwanda without talking about the invasion of the Congo and how Rwanda and Uganda invaded the Congo for the last 25 years. It started in 1996 to this day. Congolese people are being killed, and Kagame has not been held accountable. And why do you think that is? If he did not have the cover of the Western countries, for example, there was a release of a report called the UN Mapping Report. The UN Mapping Report was released in 2010, and guess who blocked it from being released? It was the US mission to the UN, which was under the Obama administration, the first black president. The ambassador to the UN was a black woman, Susan Rice. She blocked it because at one point she worked for a lobbying firm that lobbies for Paul Kagame. In addition, by the way, so speaking of, um, this podcast, is aired out of Atlanta. Let's talk about Atlanta. The former mayor of Atlanta, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, and a veteran of the civil rights movement. Anybody? Do you want to guess,
Andy
Kalonji?
Young.
There you
Yeah,
go.
Andy
Andy
Young.
Young.
Yes, yes.
Andrew Young's farm. I have invoices of that firm. Good Works International was the name of the firm. Was a lobbyist for Paul Kagame. Andy Young is one of the people who actually are friends, personal friends, or friends with Kagame. Provides cover for Kagame. Susan Rice, Bill Clinton, Tony Blair of the UK, Rick Warren, Paul Farmer of I forget what it's called, something international. Lee at the World Bank, the Bill Gates Foundation. Paul Kagame has these friends, and that is who he is. And he's also like well known in the circles of the academia, in places like he's been invited to speak at Harvard and Yale, in various places. Um, and whenever his record comes out, or whenever he's creating chaos, somebody will show up usually Bill Clinton or somebody, and start to speak up on his behalf. So everybody I named there, like I said,
Right.
I have invoices from Good Works International doing work, Good Works, in a veteran of the civil rights movement. So Kagame is also not only not a Pan-Africanist, a mass murderer and a genocidaire, but also a puppet of the West, but also a con artist. I'm not sure what Andrew Young's, for example, I mean, this is a person, when we look at MLK's pictures, we see Andrew Young, standing next to him. But
Listen.
then he turns around and, he's a supporter of Paul Kagame, who's killed millions of people. So he's a complex character, if I can put it that way. But again, we must always keep in perspective the massacre and the genocide of the 6 million Congolese people, and there's been no justice. And you think about Robert Mugabe, who started getting in trouble when he started repossessing lands from white colonial settlers in Zimbabwe. Had he been uh, had he killed millions of people and not touched white people's lands, he would still be around. So
It'd be good.
Kagame, again, cannot fool anybody about being a Pan-Africanist. And I just want to stop there so that I don't hog the whole time.
No, it's all good. I don't know why you threw me under the bus talking about Atlanta. Nah, I mean, we know that you can't be in certain positions if you're not bought and sold. So we clear about Dandy Andy and the rest of these characters, and we get caught up in what the well, this guy marched with that one and so on and so forth. I mean, there was, like you all talked about earlier, about the provocateurs and the infiltrators that existed within Rwanda. I mean, it's like that throughout. That's the American fabric. You know what I'm saying? It's interwoven, and we can't be fooled. We're not as one of our OGs would say, we're not into black faces in high places. You understand what I'm saying? We're not caught up in the personality. You know what I'm saying? A piece of shit is a piece of shit, no matter how you dress it up.
Yeah,
you can put a bow tie on it, a necktie, you know what I'm saying, a cummerbund.
Can't put perfume on it.
Whatever, it's still gonna smell like shit.
No deodorant. Yeah.
It's still gonna be what it is. So we're clear, and we know that that Andy and the rest of them, they're not confused. They're not, you can't, there's no ignorance here. They're clear about what's what. And the fact is, unfortunately, because we are such a divided people, it is easy because of the fact that, the attitude, well, it's not my people. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, what have they done for us? You know what I'm saying? That's the number one trick of the trade right there. You know what I'm saying? They just, the divide and conquer. Let's say, okay, well, they don't look like you and they think you're stupid and you don't look like them and so on and so forth. And we get confused and used. But, we're quite clear.
That is proof that all skin folk and kinfolk, right?
Man, look here, man. See you rapping now. Claude in the building. Act like y'all know. you bought Nadine just in case.
That's right. That's right.
Running shotgun.
It's
Anyway.
a 1-2 punch.
Yes.
The lightning and thunder.
Yes. I want to I mean, and we've covered a lot, but not enough. You know what I'm saying? We're still rolling. And to the folks in the chat, please share this. This is one of the most important pieces that we've done on this platform because of the fact that, we're talking about things in real time. A lot of times we talk about what happened in the past as if, it's not happening anymore. You know what I'm saying? They got Paul Kagame walking around like with the Abraham Lincoln syndrome. You know what I'm saying? I freed the slaves. You know what I mean? And in reality, we know that it's it's all bullshit. And it's all sponsored by the same corporation, that being the U.S., the French, the Belgians, the West, and as a whole. I want to, one of the things that you all spoke about was the fact that, there are people who are still suffering for speaking out against what's going on. and we are quite clear that Claude and Nadine couldn't rock what they couldn't talk about what they're talking about if they were in the Congo, if they were in Rwanda, if they were in Uganda, or anywhere in that region, and many other parts of the diaspora as a whole, and probably places in the United States, to be quite honest with you. You know, let's talk about some of these folks who are disappeared and who have been kidnapped, and who you spoke about one particular brother in 2015 that you know, he vanished. I mean, how, you know, is this a regular thing, or is this, you know, let's talk about that.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that was my brother, my own blood brother.
Okay.
Nadine, no, he's talking about the bodyguard that I talked about, who sent the testimony, the video testimony about the
Oh,
shooting of
Yeah, but let's
the president.
yeah.
But let's talk about your brother.
yeah, let's definitely talk about
Disappeared,
Yeah,
both.
because
because
I think it's important.
he mentioned 2015 for some reason. I thought that that is the person that he was talking about, because we mentioned him like in the last video that we did, me and you, on HMG. Yeah, so yeah, my brother vanished in 2015. My brother was one of the strong Rwandan activists, advocate against Paul Kagame's way of doing things. But also, one thing people have to know is that Kagame has intelligence everywhere, worldwide, and he also have people that he sends to target the refugees, to target the activists, and to sometimes they kill you on the spot, or they the other method they use, they kidnap. So my brother went to Kenya thinking that he was actually meeting some of the activists that he was supposed to have a meeting with. He left the United States, went to Kenya, and we never heard from him. And he disappeared along with other two Rwandan activists that he was with. Yeah, so that's one thing, like as Rwandan activists, we always have to be careful. We just don't go anywhere. Like we don't have freedom to go anywhere like regular people.
He was coming from the United States, you said, too, Kenya?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was coming from United States, going to Kenya, thinking that the people that he was in communication with, they were on the same page. They were activists like he was. But indeed, they were fake activists who were actually working for Paul Kagame. And so they kidnapped him and he vanished. And we still cannot find any traces.
This goes back to, we talked about the infiltration. This game of infiltrating has been going on with the RPF for a long time. And the way they do it, they will bring somebody to eat, drink, talk, walk, and do everything like you, and look like he's basically a clone of you. Basically, all of that. I'm just using a metaphor to show they will bring people so that they can establish trust, make it look like you're with them or they're with you, and those people are the ones who will facilitate actually you getting killed or disappeared. Many times there's red flags. We actually now, like we can recognize where those red flags are. When we see them, some people, they ignore them. And some people, take them seriously. There's usually something that will show you that this person is foul. And if you just pay no attention, or you just think, well, I'm okay, I'm just gonna, keep doing what I do and do it, however I want, it'll get you in trouble. So I wrote an article last year in the Black Star News, and I talked about how Rwanda has such an extensive surveillance system using human beings, that it's more sophisticated than the NSA surveillance tools. And I was half joking, because literally, inside of Rwanda itself, every 10 homes are actually monitored, by somebody within the RPF. So the things that are happening now in Rwanda, if I can just summarize, like highlight the things that they happen. We talk about disappearances, like Nadine's brother, or the brother that I talked about earlier that was going to testify about the shooting of the plane. and so many others, hundreds of others. There is enforced disappearance where actually members of the security forces will grab you and snatch you off the street and take you away. This happens mostly to street vendors and street children. So when we talk about Kigali being a clean city, it's cleaned by removing the people, sending them to camps or taking them to torture chambers, and many times never to be seen again. People of our generation, there's a study that showed that nearly 600,000 people born between the year 1979 and 2007, in a period of just 10 years, between 2005 and 2016, nearly 600,000 people disappeared. They cannot be found. The other thing is,
wait.
Yes, it's a genocide. I just described the genocide.
You said between what year and what year?
Between 79 and 2007. The period of 28 years. It's a whole generation. Between 79 and 2007, born in that period, have disappeared. And we cannot find a trace of nearly 600,000 of those people. And that's only people who disappeared in the years between 2005 and 2016. So we're not talking about people after 2016. We're not talking about people before 2005. Just in that period. Yes, I just described a genocide of a generation.
So you're talking about a genocide after a genocide. You know,
yes.
what I mean? You're talking about, I mean, you're saying over 500,000 people just straight missing. I mean, just like vanished.
See, now I know you're paying attention, because that's not a small statistics.
Yes.
It's really small,
and also,
amount of time.
That's what I was mentioning, that when people think that Paul Kagame stopped the genocide, no, he did not stop the genocide. He actually continued the genocide that he had started in 1990, but he keeps changing the methods of conducting that genocide. But the genocide goes on in Rwanda.
The other things I wanted to highlight is the journalist, like anybody, you know, if you speak out. So we're talking about the ordinary people, those 600,000 people, we don't know them. Some of them we know. These are like family members, friends, and many other people that we don't know. Obviously, 600,000 people is a lot of people. But there's the disappearances. There is the arbitrary arrests and holding people in pre-trial detention forever. Sometimes, you know, for years and years. There's people who speak out. I mean, there's a lady, for example, her name is Yvonne Idamange. She opened a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel lasted literally 2 weeks. And she was thrown in jail. And in this September, she was sentenced to 15 years in prison for speaking out on a YouTube channel. You know, we talk about artists, you know, people like Aimable Karasira, who lost his whole family to the RPF, you know, after surviving the genocide. He goes out and he starts telling his story, and, you know, he talks about some of the things that are wrong in Rwanda. First, they harass the university that he worked at. He loses his job, and now he's in jail, been jailed for months now, for 6 months, almost 7, with no trial. No one knows. Actually, no one has seen him in public. I'm just giving highlights, you know. Right. But those are some of the big highlights. People are punished for speech. People are assassinated in prison. I mean, they shoot prisoners with handcuffs on and shackled and say that they were trying to escape. How does somebody try to escape a jail with their feet tied and their hands tied? And so all of that, just to show the picture of when we see the Rwanda that we are shown in the media, it's basically the rosy picture painted by the Western supporters of Rwanda. But when we look at the reality, Rwandans themselves are suffering, and this is affecting us, the global African. Every one of us that cares about a person of African descent is affected when an injustice happens to somebody, to one of our sisters and brothers. And again, I want to make sure that it's understood Paul Kagame is a puppet of the West. The things that he does is with the support of the West, diplomatically, militarily, financially, and in so many different ways. So let's not get it twisted. Let's get it straight. Paul Kagame is a hired gun. He is a mercenary for the West, and he carries out all these killings and everything. Let that not be a reflection on us. That's why we take a stand. That's why we speak up and speak out and make sure, because I personally know from my own experience that speaking up and speaking out actually does save lives.
Yeah.
But
And
I just
also,
want to make sure that that is out there.
and also, I would like to add on something that besides him, like he initially was targeting Hutus. Now Paul Kagame target anybody. There's a lot of Tutsis who are also facing the same kind of injustice. Even some of them have helped him take the power. There are some rich Tutsis businessmen who contributed in raising money for the RPF to attack Rwanda. Some of them he's already turning against them, maybe because they don't agree on some stuff, or maybe because they finally seeing the guy they supported is not the guy they thought that he was. But even there is a lot of Tutsis who are also facing injustice. So it's not only Hutus right now. Anybody who speaks against Rwandan government gets in trouble, gets killed, gets imprisoned, or gets all kinds of
Yeah.
harassment.
Even people who like actually financed his war with their money, he's turned around and killed them. So um, again, this isn't a simple Paul Kagame thing. This is a part of the larger white supremacy around the world, and Paul Kagame is just an agent of that.
Let me ask. I know that right now we know it's a lot of unrest in Ethiopia. You have the TPLF, and of course in Rwanda you have the RPF. What are the similarities? Because it seems to be kind of it seems like
Twins. Let's talk about some identical twins. Nadine, you want to go first?
yeah that's
Yeah,
what I'm thinking. I'm like,
actually, I would like to say that that's one thing that caught my attention when the whole Ethiopian conflict started. I was like, okay, what is going on? Because what I started noticing was that, okay, the guy who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, now he's becoming a genocidaire. Now they're painting, they're smearing all these things on him. I'm like, okay, he's prime minister, and this rebel is like causing chaos and everything. So I started following, and their story is it kind of matches exactly the Rwandan story. So TPLF and RPF are exactly the same. They use violence. Yeah, they both massacre people, and then they play victims, and that's exactly what RPF do. They know how to kill, and then they'll play victim. And then also in Ethiopia, in Rwanda, there is a genocide. The genocide has become a tool in Rwanda. Like me and Claude or any activist who starts speaking up, we automatically labeled genocide denier. You know, they label a genocide denier. If sometimes if you was too young, because they can't say you killed people because we were too young when all that happened.
right.
They'll go after your parents. They'll go after somebody in your family. They'll start smearing lies, saying that they are genocidaire. So they use genocide as a tool to attack anybody who speaks against them. And that's the same thing TPLF was saying. They were saying how they were saying the government of Ethiopia is killing Tigrayans. And that is a lie, because as the Ethiopians are showing what is happening on the ground without relying the information to what the mainstream media is talking about, we are kind of noticing that all those are lies, because even in Rwanda, even in the court, they haven't found any evidence that showed that there was a long plan by the Rwandan government to start the genocide. So they both use genocide as a tool to silence anybody who goes against them. They both use the violence against their own people. They're both supported by the Western media. They are supported by the Western corporations, United States, UK. So there is a lot of similarities. And both, like when Ethiopia was being led by the TPLF, and they all had like good ratings. Yeah, Ethiopia was, the economy was great. In Rwanda right now, economy is great. It's the most progressing country. So it's just a game, like it's a Western game of how they use it to put the people they want in place in countries of Africa. So there is some similarities, and Claude can add on if he wants to.
For sure, TPLF and RPF are like copy paste. I'm so glad that people are now waking up to the TPLF, and hopefully even our Rwandan, our fellow Rwandans are following, because for many years I've been saying, watch Ethiopia. Look what's happening in Ethiopia. It's exactly what's happening in Rwanda. Both Kagame and Meles Zenawi, who was the leader of the TPLF, and the prime minister of Ethiopia for years, came at the same time, both supported by the West. Both claimed the economies were like the fastest growing in Africa, 8% a year, 8% a year, copy paste. An ethnic minority running over the whole country in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, same. The narrative about them, these are mass murderers. These are people who have invaded their neighbors, both of them. Remember, Ethiopia had that violent war between Ethiopia and Eritrea in, I believe it was 2000, around the year 2000. It was horrible that time. Rwanda has invaded the Congo, all with the support of the West. When Meles Zenawi died, to finish this point, remember when I said, do you remember who I said blocked the UN mapping report that exposed the genocide that happened in the Congo? You remember the name that I mentioned in the Obama administration?
Was it Rice or?
Yes, Susan
okay,
Rice.
Okay.
Guess who wrote a glowing obituary to Meles Zenawi when he died? The TPLF leader.
Stop
Same
that.
person, Susan
Stop
Rice.
that.
This
Yes.
is somebody that killed massive numbers of Ethiopians, and yet U.S. Officials were raving about him. So all of this to display that both the TPLF are basically and the RPF are puppets of the West. They're fabrications, of the West as they are right now. They are puppets of the West, and they are destroying not only the people in the countries that they are a part of, but also the people who belong to the same ethnicity as them. Because when you look at what's happening in Ethiopia, there's so many Tigrinya, so many people in Tigray who are against what the TPLF is doing. So to really connect the dots, this No More movement speaks so much, not only to Ethiopia, but to Rwanda, to the Great Lakes region of Africa, and also to the whole African continent and the global African all over, wherever we are, in Haiti, in Jamaica, in Barbados, by the way. Glad they got rid of the, being a part of the kingdom and are now an independent republic. In you name it, in Cuba, whatever part of the world that we're in as a global African, in Brazil, in Colombia,
The U.S.
The U.S. definitely.
Yes.
The U.S. has the largest Black population outside of outside of Africa. I think. It must be in the top 10.
Brazil, India, a few different spots.
Yeah. So for me, when I look at the type of exploitation that we're undergoing, the TPLF and the RPF are agents of the West, just like we have sellouts within our communities who serve in the oppression of our people. And to me, that's the big similarity. And they are supported by those who uphold the systems of oppression. And when we talk about the dismantling and the dismantling of the of systemic racism, that includes dismantling the puppets and the supporters of such systems, and those include the RPF and the TPLF.
You know, man, it's definitely, you know, I mean, when you talk about similarities in the playbook, you know, they just adjust it for wherever they at. You know what I'm saying? It's like these imperialists, depending on who the colonizer is, the chief colonizer is, they might change the language. And it's like they got one big book, and this is in Portuguese, this is in French, this is in English, this is in Spanish. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing here in the United States. And folks can't see the connection. And it's important, like you said, to connect the dots because of the fact that, you know, you had just this past year, you had all these folks in the street talking about Black Lives Matter. You know what I'm saying? Which was empty sloganeering, and it was an opportunity for white folks to say that, you know, I'm cool. You know what I'm saying? I support, you know, they shouldn't kill black folks in the streets of Atlanta or Oakland or New York or wherever the case is. But we're talking about genocide on a much larger scale. And we talk about Black Lives Matter, but that doesn't go outside of the United States. When they say Black Lives Matter, they're not talking about Haiti. They're not talking about Cuba. They're not talking about Rwanda. They're not talking about the Congo. They're not talking about Ethiopia. You know what I'm saying? They're talking about, you know, let's get these slaves over here cool. You guys happy? All right. Don't worry about them over there. They you know, they beefing with each other. You know what I'm saying? So just like with this whole hashtag no more thing, I think that it's a great start.
Yeah.
But we have to it is the job of the organizers to figure out how to make that connection. So in saying that, I'm definitely glad to have you two on because of the fact that, you know, I'm hearing the same thing from all over the planet. You know what I mean? Folks in Cuba and Venezuela, so on and so forth. And they're all saying, like, you know, we have to connect. We got to do this. We got to do that. So, you know, I'm looking forward to more work. I want to ask in closing, and we're definitely going to have you all back on here. I want to ask about, you know, what do you all feel can be done from this side of the of the water? You know what I'm saying? How can we get these words out, get these names out?
Yeah, pretty much. I think the most important thing is raising awareness because you can't start fighting for something if you don't know exactly what's going on. And for now, we are doing a good job, like having a platform like Black Power Media where we can actually tell our own stories and tell what is going on. This is a good start. And then also, I feel like the more we raise awareness and then we start taking actions, like we, by talking to, you know, finding like telling America what is happening and start advocating for our brothers in Africa, our brothers worldwide, in Caribbean, in America, you know, and tell these American leaders to stop sponsoring these rebellions, to stop sponsoring this terrorist group in Africa, because they are terrorist groups that they are being sponsored by the West. So we need to start targeting our authorities, especially in these countries that are sponsoring them. We need to start showing exactly to the world what they are doing and confront them with what they are doing, and see, hopefully with that we're going to have some change happening.
Yeah, I also believe that if a successful revolution has to be global, and in order for it to be global, the globe has to know. And I think it's important, you know, as Nadine said, I'm really echoing and driving home the point of raising awareness, because knowledge is power. It's important that people know as they start. Then once people know, then they can take the right action. Because right now, because there's so much ignorance, sticking with just Rwanda, without going into the wider, bigger picture of systemic racism and why it must be dismantled. But if we just speak about Rwanda and Kagame, most people have only heard the propaganda that comes from Western, the dominant narrative, the Western dominant narrative, and from Kagame. And they do not know how much he's destroyed Black lives and Black people and Africa and the Great Lakes region of Africa, the origin of life, in a place with so much potential for, to the whole world, for his own benefit, the benefit of his little clique, and the benefit of the West. And until people understand and know who he is, people will continue to take, to defend him and take incorrect action. And so that's where it starts, making sure that people know. So that's why I am so grateful for the platform, grateful that we're able to have this conversation and be able to share with, with so many audiences. And then the next steps will be, to me, it has to lead to radical change of, systemic change, not just, Rwanda's changed, but Burundi still has problems, and Congo still has problems, and things like that. It has to be a global approach. As much as we think locally and act locally, it must be, toward the goal of a global change. But again, to take that action, we must understand what's the game, who are the players, who's doing what, and where have we been fooled. I want to end with this. When we listen to Twistory, which is the story of the West and Kagame, for example, which is history twisted. I don't want to butcher it, so let me pull it up to make sure I got it right. When we listen to Twistory,
You about to read a poem, Claude? Claude,
it's not a
like
poem. We got to look at who's telling the story,
no doubt,
who has the power, whose voices are left out, who's benefiting from the voices being left out. So I wanted to make sure that I hit all of those points. And what we are dealing with now is Twistory, and what you are doing and what this platform is doing is untwisting that Twistory into real story, history, our story.
no doubt. Well, we're doing that together, and that's the reason why we have a Black Power Media. You know what I mean, so that we can get as much proper. I hate to use that propaganda. You know what I'm saying? The proper information
right, propaganda.
out. Yeah. We have to be able to, like you said, tell our own story, man. And I'm definitely grateful that you all had enough faith and confidence in coming on the platform, because of the fact that, for myself as an organizer, as a activist, or a quote unquote freedom fighter, I've been on many platforms where we start off on one page, and before long, folks are trying to twist your words, and you're getting into debates and all kinds of BS, you know what I'm saying, all kinds of bullshit, you know what I mean? And, so I appreciate, I don't take any of our guests or our audience for granted, because of the fact that, for me, this is our time is the most valuable resource we have. You know what I'm saying? And we don't know how much time we have. So for anyone to even sit here and speak to us or even listen, you know what I mean? To me, it's an honor and it's a privilege. It's not just, I'm not on bullshit. So I'm not really interested in knowing, about what Kanye next album's about, or no kind of crazy shit like that. I'm trying to find out where we strategically and how we're going to win, because of the fact that we owe our ancestors, you know what I'm saying? And we owe our generations to come. And I'm under the strong belief that we will prevail. Despite all the bullshit going on, we will prevail. So with that said,
Definitely.
you already know.
It will prevail.
Indeed. So just know that Black Power Media is another home for you all. You know what I'm saying? And we're looking forward to bringing it back in.
There is one thing I wanted to add on because like right now, there is this movement where we have, which is great. We have a lot of African American wanting to move back to Africa. It's great, but I feel like they should also know the history of where, because I've seen some already in Rwanda and giving all these praises to Rwanda. But I'm like, there are people suffering, but you will never know because they want to show you that good picture so you can come, you can bring your money in Rwanda. But I feel like also, they also should be aware of where they are going, the history, who is doing what. And so that way, because if we want to make the Africa great, if you want the Black race to succeed, we should not just focus on one area, because maybe, okay, my life is bad in the United States, I'm going to Africa, I feel better there. But you should also kind of look around and make sure everyone, everybody around you is also in having the same feeling like you are. Just same as in the United States, as Africans who live in the United States, when injustice is being committed towards the African American, we should feel the same way as African Americans are feeling. We should fight together against the injustice. So, yeah, that's one thing I wanted to add on.
I'm gonna correct you on one thing. We are not African Americans. We are Africans in America. So you got to keep that. We didn't come here. Many of us didn't come here willingly. So
absolutely.
Yeah. You messing up the solidarity already, Nadine. What's up?
No.
He's halfway there. So
my apologies.
I should have gave you a smoke break. But anyway.
I already had my vegetables before.
Hey, I already know. Hey, you see Claude disappeared. Tell me he had to close the window.
Anyway.
Hey,
gotta take the breaks when you need them, right?
No doubt. But definitely, man. Revolutionary love. Yeah. Yes, that's all good. You tripping now. Like, hold on. you got us thinking we rolling with Andy Young or something. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, definitely we appreciate you all coming on. Let's stay in tune, stay in touch. For folks that are checking us out, it didn't cost you nothing to be here but a few brain cells. But your task and your homework is to make sure, go to YouTube, tweet, retweet, post, and whatever it is you have to do. Because we always talking about we need our own propaganda and the West is not reporting our story. Look, we already put the platform together. We got the players. Now put it out there. Let folks know that it exists so that we can, keep it going on. And it's not about, for the record, it's not about a numbers thing. It's about, this is part of our re-education process. This is part of the political education because of the fact that now we all have learned something from here. And shout out to the comrades in the chat. I know that I've seen a couple folks that said they were a part of they survived the genocide as well and survived the wars. So salute to you as well. We're glad that you're here. We're glad that you all survived. And, we're going to be here till victory. All right. Checking out Riot Starter TV. We were joined by my man Claude and Nadine in the building. And, you'll see more of them. We're going to get them their own show on Black Power Media. I'm going to just put it out there. Just put them to work. We're gonna get them their own show so they can go in and do what they do. But definitely stay on the right side of the barricades, and we'll catch you all in a few ticks. Riot Starter TV, Black Power Media. Salute. We'll see you all later on. You know what it is. Check us out tomorrow. Remix Morning Show, early in the morning, 8 to 10 a.m. EST. We out. Black Power Media.